Thank you very much, John. Don't forget.
I've got to stand where people can see me. So, thank you. Good evening. My name's John Fargher. I'm an agricultural scientist and economist. I've worked all over the world for much of my career. Worked with Jerry in the past, a long time ago. I used to chair the Water Resources Council in South Australia, which is the peak water policy body. And now I'm slowly moving towards retirement, not as fast as I would like. And a few years ago, bought a property in Yandy, which we're managing for biodiversity. And the topic I was asked to speak on tonight is conservation on private land or private protected areas. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to start global and come back to local. And I've already seen people looking at the creature up there, which is at our place. And I think there's a real opportunity for enthusiasts and experts like yourselves to be working with landholders like me to enhance biodiversity conservation and understand the values of what we've got. So let's kick off. Now, the IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, they, can you read that from here? Yeah. They define private protected areas in specific ways, and it really comes down to governance. It's about who owns and manages the natural resources and protects them. So we can talk about that in a little bit. But there's some good data actually on this with the World Database on Protected Areas, and different countries have different amounts of public protected areas, and in some of those, like Nepal, Guatemala, the private sector actually does a lot more than the public sector. So it's important. Australia's got a relatively small proportion of land protected on private land, but we've also got a pretty good national reserve estate. So you know, it sort of depends a little bit on the country and the setting. But what's clear from the data from IUCN globally is that private conservation is increasingly important. We know there's not enough conservation protection of biodiversity globally. It's below the thresholds that were set in various agreed forums globally. You know, there's sort of 15 to 20% of biodiversity. And so I think what we've got is an opportunity for enthusiastic groups with knowledge like yourself to be working with landholders to encourage more land to be protected. The definitions by IUCN relating to private governance are land that's managed for protection by individuals, non-government organisations, corporations, companies, not-for-profit and for-profit owners, research entities, including universities and field stations, and religious entities. So you never know, with your budget, the way it's going, I mean, I'd have your fees at $30 and aim to buy some land, but you know, be ambitious. But you can do that with your charitable status. You can have that as an ambitious down the track. So globally, this is on the IUCN register. So this is an underestimate of what's actually there in practice, but this is measured and reported. So 162,000 square kilometres of protected area in private hands globally. And you can see from that chart that most of it is with individual landholders. So this is very important because they often have enthusiasm and land, but not necessarily knowledge. So there's a real opportunity, I think, for synergy between organisations like yours and these landholders. It's about 6% of the global protected area overall is in private hands. And they're mostly quite small. And so we'll get to this problem of fragmentation, which you're all, I'm sure, very familiar with. And I'll come to the Australian details in a minute. Overall in Australia, we're doing better than the global average. As you know, under our constitution, natural resources belong to the states. And so it's state regulations that control whether land and natural resources are protected under the local regulations. So in South Australia, it's under the Native Vegetation Act with a heritage agreement. And there's covenants in Queensland and different arrangements in Victoria and so on. So we'll see how that works. But the regulatory framework in Australia is strong. In America, it's okay. In the UK, it's quite strong. In some other countries, it's weak. And in most countries, it doesn't exist at all. So there's a real opportunity globally to contribute to that governance strengthening work as well. And again, you know, for your organisation, it's the sort of thing where peer-to-peer collaboration could help. You know, similar groups in other countries advocate for stronger governance of private protected areas. Okay, so let's look at what IUCN says for Australia. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but those purple blotches are what the IUCN database says are private protected areas in Australia. And the yellow is the public protected areas plus Indigenous land, Aboriginal land. So you've got the marine parks, the terrestrial parks, and the private protected areas. Now, South Australia is well represented there because our heritage agreements tick all the boxes for regulatory control and all the rest, similarly in Tasmania. But you can see the Victorian ones don't. And so this is a significant underestimate of Australia's position. So it's, what you're seeing there is about 2/3 of the reality, but that's what's on the global database. Now, the Australian data, which is 2009, so it's actually very difficult to get current data for this. You can see that there's, and obviously this is easy to read on the screen, so this is all available. Jerry's got the file, so feel free to grab it. You can see the heritage agreements in South Australia, that sort of orangey tan colour, and ones in blue and so on, plus the Aboriginal land. Now, your internet connection is unstable. I live at Yandy. I'm on the NBN satellite, I knew that. So look, here's the statistics. I'll just go through this quickly. So the National Reserve System in Australia, about 43% of the area is public land, and that's a bit more than 8% of our land mass. Then there's Indigenous protected areas, which is Aboriginal land. Now there's an assumption that that's managed for biodiversity, and that's not always the case, but that's 44% of the National Reserve System in Australia, and again, just over 8% of the land mass. 6% of the National Reserve is PPAs, private protected areas, a bit over 1% of the land mass of Australia. So that's still pretty good. That's 4,250 protected areas in private hands in Australia. That's the Australian data, not the IUCN data. So it's a good start, but you know, 1% of the land mass is not much, and we could do more. So I think there's a real opportunity to advocate further. And David Spears, our Minister for Environment, has got a program going in South Australia over the last 12 months called Reinvigorating Conservation on Private Land. And they're providing grants to people to manage their heritage agreement areas better and to put more land under heritage agreement. So that's one of the things that is happening in South Australia. Now, I won't dwell on these data too much, but I thought I'd put them in there as a resource for you. You can see with South Australia, a large proportion of the total number of protected areas in Australia, private protected areas, are in South Australia. And the average size is not too bad, 424 hectares, but that includes a lot of pastoral country. So it's a skewed distribution. So the average doesn't really mean much, but it's nearly 650,000 hectares in South Australia. So it's a lot of land. It's a lot of management. But there's this problem of fragmentation. So I want to go through a local example. It's Fleurieu Peninsula, obviously, and the red circle is our place at Yandy, which is not far from Mount Compass. And the blue squares on that figure up there, on that image, are heritage agreement areas. So these are private protected areas on people's land that they have got a heritage agreement under the Native Vegetation Act, and that is on the title and it can't be moved. Now, the covenants in Queensland, I can put it on as a landholder, and then I sell the place and the next landholder can ask the minister to take it off, and it usually will be. So it's not very secure. Whereas in South Australia, it's done and dusted. Once it's there, it goes through a process, but once it's there, it's there. Similar in Tasmania. Western Australia's got a mix. So this is really the question, because what a lot of NGOs are doing is buying land, putting a covenant on it, and then selling that land with the covenant. And it's called a revolving fund, where you have a pot of money, you buy land, you fix it up, you put a heritage agreement, whatever, on it, and then you sell it and you buy another piece of land and repeat the process. So this is a way of expanding the private estate. So let's look at the problem now. So this is in detail. Can you see that up there? So our place is there with 2 heritage agreement areas on it. That's Fleuria Swamp. So it's about 5 hectares of swamp. And I've got bits of it on me still from this morning, but that's good. Fleuria Swamp's very endangered biodiversity, and there's not a lot under national park. There's Lepidoptera and a few other small bits, but we want more of this protected. My neighbour, which is the same bit of swamp, doesn't have a heritage agreement. He's quite committed to looking after the swamp, but he's an elderly gentleman, and he will sell that place and someone will put horses or sheep or some damn thing on it, and that'll be the end of the swamp. The next bit of swamp that's worth looking at is 4 kilometres down the road. Beautiful piece of swamp, very, very rare plants in there, club mosses, all sorts of things. It's a very, very decent piece of swamp, and it's large. And the 2 owners, this is 2 titles, are very committed to looking after it. There's no grazing, it's fenced off, it's all good. But again, somebody could come in. They couldn't clear it because it's covered under the Native Vegetation Act. You wouldn't get a permit to clear it. But there's nothing to say you can't let your stock wander in there. Well, deer, there's feral deer up there. So, you know, there's all these feral animals as well as, is that a question? Yes, sorry, yeah. No, they would not legally. They could drain the swamp with, you know, that Tony Abbott thing of asking forgiveness rather than permission. But if they sought permission, they would not get it. So it's what is known as a water affecting activity, and the Landscape Board has a process for doing that, and you wouldn't get a permit to drain it. I'm having to go through that process with the Landscape Board at the moment because we have a drain through our swamp, which I'm trying to backfill to restore the hydrology of the swamp. And they're saying, oh, you've got to fill out the form and pay your money. And anyway, they get you both ways. But you can see the problem, you know, just in that small area there, there's one small part that is protected, and there's 2 bits that are not protected. And I can't persuade my neighbour to put a heritage agreement on his, and I can't persuade the other 2 people yet. They're wavering. They're on the path.
Does the heritage agreement take in the whole of the land, or can you just allocate parts of the land?
It's just the biodiversity that you want to be protected. Yeah, so which I think is actually another problem, because I won't go into the minute detail of our place, but the heritage, the Fleuria Swamp, which is listed under the federal legislation, the EPBC Act, is endangered nationally. And we have plants on there that are internationally recognised as endangered. We've got Mount Compass oak bush, for example. There's about 25 or 30 left in the wild. We've got half of those on our place. Herbertia tenuis, very rare plant, swamp plant, 50 to 60 left in the wild. We've got a third of those on our place. Now, those 2 plants are well looked after by the Botanic Gardens. They will not go extinct now. But in the wild genetics, our place has got a fair slice of it. So, and the neighbour's got some, and the other place further to the east has some. So I'm trying very hard, and David Spears is trying very hard to get these people to put stuff under heritage agreement. But the other thing is, to the north of our swamp is a very high quality piece of woodland, lots of butterflies in there. And of course, you've got this ecotone going from the woodland down to the swamp. And so I've applied to put a new heritage agreement on the woodland, but they wouldn't let me expand the existing heritage agreement to cover the whole lot. So it's, anyway, look, as long as it gets protected, that's the main thing.
Just going to say to John that the Zoomies would like this question repeated. So a short question.
Okay, yep.
John,
Yep. Thanks, Jerry. Last question, and then we'll have some more at the end. Go on. He's forgotten that now. Okay, so the question is about heritage agreements. Does it have to be surveyed at your cost? Not really. The Department of Environment and Water is very, very supportive in this. And I mean, I've done my own management plans and surveys because I have the necessary skills, but other people talk with the Department of Environment and the Landscape Board, and they send out botanists and others to support. And there's this program which also provides small amounts of money to landholders to get that done by professionals if it's needed. So it's pretty painless to get a heritage agreement in place. It's supported. And I have to say the people in the Department of Environment, Katrina and her team, are very, very effective. They ring you up, they deal with you, they actually treat you like a customer, which is very unusual. They're very helpful. So we set up Yundi Nature Conservancy, and the surrounding landholders who are graziers said, oh, bloody greenies and da-da-da. And I explained that, 36 acres is too small to graze, and I can't use water for irrigated agriculture. So biodiversity is what I can do there, and they benefit from it because the birds that live on our place eat insects and bugs from the pastures and the neighbouring farms. The serracid wasps go and parasitise the beetles in the pasture and all the rest of it. So we're providing ecosystem services to our neighbours for free. And when they understand it, maybe they can pay us. But for now, they have over 2.5 years, they've now understood that we are just as much part of the agricultural landscape and value add as their cows and all the rest of it. We need that mix in the landscape, that mosaic in the landscape. So conservation is valuable for agriculture as well as for biodiversity in its own right. And so here's a few examples of things that we're doing, because one of the messages I wanted to leave with you tonight is that for a private landholder to protect biodiversity, it's not set and forget. It's very active management. And I underestimated how much work it would be to manage biodiversity, like effectively manage it. And I've only been there 2.5 years, so that this is our third spring that we're coming into now. And I'm learning a lot. And I'm observing a lot. But I thought a lot of it would be easy, and it's not. It's a lot of hard work. I've spent 4 hours this morning in the swamp cutting Phragmites, getting covered in mud and other stuff. But what we're doing with photo points and careful records and other things is observing the changes that our management is having, and a lot of that benefits certainly Lepidoptera, but also other insects as well, and we're starting to see that. So the first thing is trying to get rid of pasture grasses on the edges of the swamp and allow the various sedges and reeds and other things to come back. So the green sort of waist-high stuff is Baumia rubigiosa or some damn thing, I don't know. It's Baumia. It's a sedgy thing, and it's very, very strong. And there's tea tree in there, which attracts a lot of insects, especially when it's flowering, mostly Lepidoptera continentale, but there's also some Lanigerum, the woolly tea tree. But the prickly tea tree is great because it grows well from seed, and the kangaroos won't eat it because it's prickly. So now part of the swamp, about a third of it, was invaded by Phragmites australis, the common reed. So it was 2.5, 3 metres tall, 200 stems per square metre, a monoculture. Phragmites is a cosmopolitan plant, which means it's on all continents except Antarctica. It really bioengineers its habitat to suit itself and exclude all other things. And once it gets going, there's very little that lives in it. A couple of birds occasionally, but there's no lizards, there's no rodents, I looked and couldn't even find insects. So we prepared a management plan, did a lot of research, got the CFS to come in and burn it. And that's the little video I have, but Jerry tells me that doesn't work on Zoom, so I'll show you a photograph instead. But 30 CFS volunteers, 5 units. Not one of them had a box of matches. I had to provide those. they're all there on May the 1st with their radios and trucks and flashing lights and the whole 9 yards. And then it's Captain Yandy, have you got matches? He didn't do it on the radio. He got me on my mobile phone and said, John, you wouldn't have a box of matches, mate. Anyway, well, no one smokes anymore. See, anyway, we burnt it. And now I'm cutting back the regrowth, and stuff's starting to come back because the burning has triggered germination. And a lot of these plants support a whole wide range of quite unique insects. But people know the plants in these swamps, they know the vertebrates. Not many people know the insects. So, this is the opportunity for Butterfly Society. One of the things I said to the landscape board is, look, we've done this research on the biodiversity values, but nobody's done the Aboriginal values. So we ran a little project with the Nurrungeri people, and we've produced this summary here called Aboriginal Knowledge and Values of Fleuria Swamps. There's piles of them up there for you to take free. Please take them and distribute them because we're keen to get the message out. And if you look on the landscape board website, there's 10 posts going into great detail about what we found. But that's an interesting and separate subject. But the point here is management, lots of hard work. This was the fire. It was a hot fire, but not hot enough because we did it. We had to wait for the fire ban period to end, and there'd been a fair bit of rain by then, so it wasn't as... they were all engaged. yeah, that was all dealt with, and they were all on side. And then we had a very wet July, so you can see we've got what we wanted, which was a good burn to trigger a germination in the remnant seeds and so on where it was, and then good flooding. And it's deep. I mean, out on the northern side there towards the woodland, and that's more than a metre deep. Now, so that's more than a swamp, but July was very, very wet. It was more than double our average rainfall. But the point is, it got a good soaking. You can see that ecotone there. So that woodland on the side there is about to be put under a heritage agreement as well. So that whole sequence will be protected. And then at the back of that woodland, 400 metres further in, is an open grassy woodland with stringy barks, Eucalyptus baxteri, which is full of butterflies in spring. And one of the things we've learned is, and I'll talk about this a bit more, but the previous owner had everything slashed within a millimetre of ground zero, for fire reasons. And of course, all the slashing was done just as the butterfly larvae were eating the grasses and all the rest of it, you can just imagine. So we stopped doing that, and two things have happened: a lot more butterflies and moths, but we've also got a whole lot of orchids and other things coming up that people had never seen before. And we've got quite rare plants coming up, including some Drosera hookeri, the little sundews. We've got 7 different species of sundews, and there's little ones and so on. Anyway, when you stop doing things, stuff starts to happen in a good way, but it doesn't mean you stop, you do nothing. It's active management in different ways and different times. A lot of it's about time. So after the fire, this is Blacknam minor, one of the soft water ferns that grows in the Fleuria swamps. You can see them starting to come back after the fire. That thing was completely surrounded by Phragmites. The Phragmites is starting to come back. You can see it on the your right-hand side there. And I'm going around with long handled secateurs, cutting that out bit by bit by hand. Because it's the only way. You've got to look at what's there, protect the biodiversity, the plants that you want to keep, and cut out the ones you don't. So there's this edge where the Phragmites and the good stuff intersected. That's very intense down there. On the other side, it's 100% monoculture of Phragmites, and I can attack that with a brush cutter. We've done quite a bit of research, careful observation, and we've found that there's a fungal disease that attacks some of the Phragmites shoots. So you can see there that brown apical meristem that's actually dead, which is a very good thing. So learning how and when to cut to encourage that fungus is an interesting thing, because we're now getting at least a third of the shoots dying naturally. Yes, go the bugs, It's okay, COVID, you're right, just attack the Phragmites. Now, I don't know what else it attacks, and I don't know what that fungus is. It's not Phytophthora. I do know that, but there's an interesting project to be done there. So that's the swamp. Other parts of the property, we've been doing some rewilding, and I'll show you some of that in a minute, but we thought we'll do a trial of carbon farming. The emissions reduction fund and how that all works in Australia is a whole another topic. But we decided to do a very thorough baseline to the IPCC standard, so the international standard, which is even more rigorous than the method used by the Emissions Reduction Fund in Australia. For a small area like us, it was a ridiculous expense. It was about $2,500, but we wanted to do it properly so that neighbouring farmers could see how it was done and all the rest of it. So this was part of that. And then we did the rewilding to start it in rows, because this was poor quality pasture and we had to be able to manage the grass. All of these trees are grown on the property from local seed, from our seed collected in other parts of the property. The ones with the big tree guards on them, the Alocasia robusta, the mountain compass oak bush, which is critically endangered, and the kangaroos just love it. So that's got stuff to protect it. Everything else is the normal tree guards, except the prickly tea tree, which nothing eats. So we just put that in and it's growing nicely. And what we found, getting back to your love, and someone can tell me what this is. I can tell you what I think it is, but even after less than a year of planting tube stock, and we've done direct seeding well, but just that's another topic. Within a year, we've got Lepidoptera moving in, right? So people say, oh, you know, biodiversity takes forever. Look, it's amazing how quickly things colonise. And I remember years ago doing this up at Balhanna, on another property I had years ago. Within a year, revegetating around dams, we had caterpillars, we had spiders, stuff moving in, and then the birds come and all the rest of it. So this thing, do you know what that is? I think it's a webbing moth. Is that what you'd call it? Some expert in the audience? Oh no, I thought it might be Salma pyrastis, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we can, whatever. It's happy. I mean, I wasn't so happy with eating my bush, but I figured, yep, it's supposed to be there. That's right. It's better that than a kangaroo. These little case moths, there's 7 or 8 different species of those, right? I don't think any of these things are extinct or rare, but the fact that they've come back in so quickly tells me that we can, in this rewilding process, by observation, working out what attracts what, we can get more of these insects, you know, in the system. These things. Yeah, good, there you go. Got an audience response. So at Yandy, there are a lot of butterflies and moths, and I haven't even started to get my head around it because I've been too busy doing the works. But I think there's a real opportunity for groups like yours to, as I said before, you know, support farmers in understanding what they've got if they're interested in protecting it. And, you know, that could be a fee-for-service thing as well, potentially. Now, this butterfly, which I think some of you were looking at in the title slide earlier, I noticed on the mistletoe, I think that's the southern large azure, Agarus genoveva. Tell me it's not.
Is that any Lepidoptera?
The mistletoe, yeah.
Yeah, it's more likely to be Amaryllis, Agarus amaryllis. That's a favourite bush of them.
Right.
That's their favourite mistletoe. I can just see a bit of light.
Sorry? Oh, so Agarus amaryllis. All right, I have to write that down. So this is where we can add value.
Well, we're going to come down and visit.
Good, good. Anyway, the point is, the more you look, the more you find. And as you would all appreciate, mistletoe is a very important food plant for a lot of animals, insects and birds and moths. And then, of course, you understand that some of these butterflies, their larval stages are managed by ants, and you have to then start thinking, well, what do I have to do to manage the habitat for the ants? So it's, you know, then you start to pull this whole web together, and this is where the Aboriginal values are very interesting, because I mean, they don't know these things, that's all lost, but they're keen to learn. But their point is all of these interacting species that we look at are complemented by spiritual things which they add to that mix, which for them are just as much part of the ecosystem as the plants and animals and insects. So I found it very interesting working with the Aboriginal people who talk about this thing called Nachi, the Nurunjeri, they call it Nachi, which is like your totem. So some plant or animal which is particular to you, and your job is to look after that and all that attends to it. And other people have other things. And all of that together adds up to a managed ecosystem. So it kind of makes sense. And I think if farmers could attach to an archie of their own, that it meant something to them, it could be a bird, it could be an insect, it could be a plant, and then understand what it would take for that plant or animal or insect to thrive, you know. So this is where I think the Aboriginal values can contribute to conservation. Okay, that's not... Are we? Caper moth, that's right. So this is not my photograph, that's a fancy one from the web. But last year, there was a fantastic migration of those. We had hundreds of them at Yandy. Ah, well.
There is no plant so small that a passing butterfly doing God knows what will not spot it, come down, bring all its friends and rip all the leaves off. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, I didn't know butterflies even ate leaves, but...
So John, just for the
Zoomies.
What was it laying its eggs on your...
It wasn't. So this was a thing. These things were blown down from the north of Australia where Capparis, you know, normally exists, and they were getting nectar, but they weren't laying eggs. So they were just moving through. Now, these are not butterflies, but I just, you know, as you're looking around, you just see these amazing things. So here's a large orb weaver spider and a grasshopper. And I suspect a grasshopper is a hard thing for a butterfly, for a spider to consume. But it certainly seemed like a fairly brave grasshopper to me, sort of the lamb and the lion type stuff. But, you know, you wander around in nature, it's like Jerry said in his AGM right at the end of his report. If you look at things, there's always something that just gives you great joy. And, you know, these bird-dropping spiders or jewel spiders, they're very quick to come back into the rewilding areas. These caterpillars, for some reason, really love blueberries, but they're also out in the wild on some of the wattle trees as well. I think it's that painted apple moth, but it's very, very impressive looking creature. You know, that one that comes down, we haven't got any milkweed on our property, but on Mount Magnificent, there's loads of it. And, you know, there's a healthy population of monarch larvae living there, and these things then come down. So we make sure we've got in the sort of ornamental garden things that feed butterflies, but also what we're planting back into the rewilding areas is a range of plants that are good for a whole wide range of insects, not just butterflies. So that brings me to this citizen science sort of idea. So again, not my photograph, but here we are with 36 acres of butterfly habitat. And if I was talking to a bird group, it would be bird habitat, but, you know, but habitat. And I do not know what's there. There are a lot of butterflies and moths, and I've learned the names of some, and there's a lot that I haven't learnt about yet. But there's a real opportunity, I think, to come and do, you know, a methodical survey of what's there, which might include an evening thing with some UV lights and stuff. But, you know, I think it's the sort of thing that would be interesting for the society to do as a sort of team building exercise, whatever you want to call it. But also, you know, it's the sort of value that people like you can really add, and the Zoom members. So I'm very keen to see if we can do that. This is what's happening globally in terms of citizen scientists. I mean, it's just taking off with mobile phones and people with interest and people living longer. You know, there's a lot of people with knowledge and interest and time who can do a lot of good, and that's encouraging protection of biodiversity on private land. And insects in there, which is the bottom dark blue colour on the right hand side, you know, they're really of great interest to people on iNaturalist and other apps. So these are a few things that I have seen in the last month that I do not know the the name of or what it is. So that's on one of the cup gums, Eucalyptus cosmophila, that was planted last year. I think it's a Lepidoptera larvae. I have no idea what it is. It's on there, it's about probably 12 or 13 millimetres long. This was another one, also on a cup gum. You know, again, so if you look, you find these things, and then you have to say, well, you know, do I leave it there eating my tree or not? The truth is, these things don't eat very much. The sulphur-crested cockatoos, when they land in 400 or 500, I mean, they're just like a lawnmower. And they don't eat anything. They are bored. They go to the dairy farm next door, fill up on grain, and then they've got 8 or 9 hours of daylight to play. And they see these green tree guards and they say, let's see if we can shred those. Let's have a race. And then they say, oh, look, there's these Acacia provincialis. We don't eat them, but they're standing up straight. We can make them lie down. Anyway, I don't have a gun. I've worked too much in war zones, but it's very tempting. Then we get these sorts of insects which parasitize things and eat other insects. So, you know, they're part of the thing. I think it could be a soldier fly, but I'm not sure. But that's on the tea tree flowering. I mean, tea tree flowers after 1 year of planting. It's a very, you know, assertive plant, but you're getting nectar and pollen very quickly. That's another one on the cup gum. If anyone knows what it is, yell out. Not yet, no. There's only 48 hours in every day. It's just, you know. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're all busy. All these sorts of bugs. This is a weevil that I really like. I think it's this. Oh yeah, I saw that film too. Yeah, it's good. Did I write that one down? Maybe not. It is. Oh no, I haven't put it down. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I know. I think it's the Sapphire Weevil or something. Anyway, it's a very handsome animal, and they live on the Acacia provincialis around the edge of the swamp, and they're there from about October, November through to January, and very, very handsome looking things. The photograph doesn't do it justice. The blue is real sky blue. It's very, very beautiful thing. Little juvenile crickets, just, you know, beautiful things. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was climate change, because in doing the observation and the management, I'm very conscious of what might be happening in 20 or 30 years' time. I mean, I probably won't be there. I would love to be, but it's technically possible, but theoretically I suspect otherwise. Anyway, the climate change is here, it's happening, and it's very unclear to me what it means for the Fleurieu Peninsula. You can look at all the models, and the range of possibilities is so huge, I just don't know. So I'm assuming that there'll be longer periods of dry, more intense periods of heavy rain, and fire risk. So I'm conscious of all those things. And this really sort of is the theory of it that's worth remembering, that, you know, as that distribution of events moves to the right, the proportion of things in the extreme increases a lot. Now, the other end of the distribution is also true, that those extremes happen less. But in our context, the very hot periods, the very extreme events, strong winds, high rain, etc., on that end of the distribution, the right-hand end, are likely to become more frequent. So what I've been doing is using these wet years we've had the last couple of years to plant a lot of stuff and then watch it. And I've deliberately planted a mix of things that can deal with drier conditions. So some of the stuff that grows further to the east of Mount Compass, down, you know, into Cox's Scrub and down towards Strathalbyn, some of those plants, including cup gum, putting them on our sites with deeper sandy soils where drought is likely to be more extreme. And then thinking through with the swamp, as we're doing getting rid of the Phragmites, what can we put there so that if it burns, it'll come back? So the Baumea and things like that are quite resilient with fire. They'll burn like stink, but they'll grow back up from the rootstock. So things like that. Whereas some of the other plants in the swamps are very, very tender, delicate. The Glycenia coral fern, for example. If you relied on that too much, once it's burnt, it's gone. And so, I'm still thinking about this. I haven't thought about it, but in terms of butterfly habitat, one of the things we've learned is that if you change your mowing regime or stop mowing altogether, you have a lot more butterfly habitat. So you all know that, but I learned that just by observation and stopping mowing. We've got more native grasses coming back. The previous owner said there's no Thermida australis on this property at all. And I said, well, okay, it's unusual because it's natural to this area. And then the areas where I stopped mowing, there's Thermida australis. Lots and lots of wallaby grass as well, lots of spear grass, lots of microlina, the weeping rice grass, all of which are food plants for Lepidoptera. So I'm still very early in it. What's clear to me is that private conservation is very, very important, but people need support. And they do get support from the government in terms of expertise. But I think what's really needed is that enthusiasm from other, civil society, broadly defined, which becomes a partnership then between civil society, interested people that care, and people that have land. And one of the things we've learned with the Aboriginal people is that they don't have access to land, most of them, certainly in the south. And they're very keen to contribute on other people's land. So we've said to the Nurrungeri people, you can come onto this property and you can do your things, and in return, you help with the management. And they're very keen. So there's a group of young people now being put together to help with that. So that's the sort of thing. So that's enough for me for now, and we'll do some questions. But I hope that stimulated some thinking anyway. Thanks, Jerry.
That was the most enthralling talk and most engaging talk. So let's have some questions. So Mike just said when he was in Waikerie teaching with his family, it was really interesting to see how many farmers had insect collections. So obviously there is an opportunity for community to actually understand their ecosystem. Yeah. And your question, Mike? So the question is, how do you handle the pressure of kangaroo grazing?
So one of the advantages of being surrounded by grazing land is that the graziers put superphosphate on their pastures and kangaroos follow phosphorus. So we use no fertilisers on our place at all, except in the productive bits we do the orchard and everything, of course, we use. But on the wild part, we have very few kangaroos. There's a family of 3 kangaroos that pretty much live on the place and it's their territory. And every now and then there'll be a group of 20 or 30 kangaroos that come through at dusk on the way to an irrigated pasture. It's always in summer. And then they come back on the way through. And so far, touch wood, they have not been a problem eating the plants except for the casuarinas, which they love, and they're protected. And once they're up high enough, they'll be all right. Because there's old ones on the place. But what we've found is kangaroos actually can't see very well. And so every now and then, one of the bigger enclosures around the casuarinas or even the smaller flute, core flute tree guards just get smashed to bits because the kangaroos just ploughed through it. I mean, they're western greys, so they're big kangaroos. So look, that they are an issue. In our area, they prefer the grazing pasture, so we don't have that, and they're welcome to it.
Right, next question.
The swamp at Mount Compass and the boardwalk and everything there. So yes, we have. So there's a number of swamps around Mount Compass, as you know. Stipaturus is the conservation area, which is well worth visiting. Take long trousers and Wellingtons, but we've looked at all of those places. So Mount Compass has very good reed populations and a few ferns and things. It doesn't have Herbertia tenuis. It's supposedly got some of these rare orchids in there, but I haven't seen them yet. I've only seen one in our place. And you can't actually get into the swamp legally at Mount Compass, which is a good idea, but to see these small things, you really need to get on your hands and knees in the mud. But look, it's a very, very important thing for two reasons. It's a useful source of seeds for things that we don't have. There's actually very few plants there that we don't already have, so I don't collect much seed from there. But the most important thing is it's accessible to the public and they can see what a Fleuria swamp is, which is what its main purpose is. So that's good.
Right, Jan, first. Phrase what you just said. What Jan was saying and postulating that it's very important for us to actually come together with other like-minded organisations of different sectors of the environment and care. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to do that. And in fact, the approach that Green Adelaide are doing to actually start looking at rewilding Adelaide is a great opportunity for us collectively, I think, to actually work together. And so that is certainly my point in organising the workshop that we're going to have on the 5th of November to actually talk about what are all these opportunities to reduce threatening processes. And that will happen with saying, okay, there's private landholders, there's organisations, there's government, everyone can contribute.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, and particularly a lot of landholders haven't understood how important native grasses are for insects. And I mean, I didn't fully understand it until I stopped slashing and suddenly saw all these common browns and other things all over the joint. So, you know, it's actually very lovely to walk into these glades in late spring, early summer, midsummer, depending on the season, and see all these butterflies going around. I mean, it's a wonderful thing, and it's not that difficult to manage for that. And in many properties, and this is part of the carbon story, most of these properties have corners and patches which are pretty low agricultural productivity for whatever reason. So our neighbours, for example, they've got woodland on rises with very shallow rocky soils, very unproductive for grazing, good shelter, but not productive for grazing. So that could be managed for many other purposes and still retain the shelter benefit, for example. So I think, you know, pulling together different interest groups and giving people from urban areas with those interests an opportunity to get to know a piece of land through the seasons, through the years, and contribute as a partnership. And that's similar to what we're doing with the Aboriginal people. They've really found that access to land over a long period a great opportunity. It really is.
Okay, one last question from the floor before we wrap. Okay, well, look, I'd like to thank you very much, John, for a wonderful evening, a fitting talk for our AGM and for the year ahead, and certainly appreciate your effort. It's great to see you. As John mentioned, John did some benefit cost analysis for a project back in the 90s for a project that I was
yesterday. We were both so young.
So to complement the moth book that John already has, I certainly like to present you with our tracking butterflies book.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.